Ohio, Ohio, Ohio gozaimasu! Ladies and gentlemen, the Life of the Party podcast with MC Ricky presents Jurassic Park Talk. I told you eventually I was going to get to some entertainment, and I love movies, so why not talk about this movie? Oh my goodness gracious. Jurassic Park, we're talking about the first one, all right? I think we all kind of know. If you didn't know, I'm about to tell you. Jurassic Park is a screen adaptation of Michael Crichton's book, which came out, I believe, in 1989, if I'm not mistaken. The movie came out in 1993, I think of June of 1993, and oh my goodness gracious. Now, I am going to date myself. People who are close to me during this time or know how old I am or whatnot. Anyway, like I mentioned before, I still look good for my age, all right? I'm not old and I'm still cool. As I mentioned in the first episode of the Life of the Party podcast with MC Ricky, the beginnings. I've grown up a military brat. Growing up overseas, we're on a military installation. This particular military installation was called Yokota Air Force Base, Japan. It's called Yokota Air Force Base, Japan. So they have what they call like first run movies now. So basically, huge blockbusters that's in the States, they would select that as a first run movie because that's the movie that everybody wants to see right away. You would get that movie first versus like in the States where you have a theater that has multiple screens so they can show all the movies that they can. For the most part, unless you're just at a huge installation, there's a theater, might be two theaters, but it's only one screen. So a first run movie is selected for those blockbusters, those movies that everybody is just waiting to see. But anyway, the movie came out in 1993, so I was a youngin', super young during that time. I remember being in school. Just the buildup of this was just amazing. Now, this is a totally different time as far as how movies are being made now and how they're being distributed, okay? Especially as it pertains to getting the movie overseas and not just being played in the continental US. Because now, if I'm not mistaken, it's basically like a share drive. Basically, you have this massive file or code or whatever you want to call it. You download it and then you're able to go ahead and play it. I could be wrong, okay? I'm not a theater expert. I'm gay. So big shout out to all my theater experts out there. If I'm wrong, call me on it. But pretty much, it is what it is. You have the file, you download it, and you play it now, all right? Back then, they had this thing called reels, I believe. So you had the reels, and they had to be sent. If you're in the U.S. and you just send all the reels around, it doesn't have to go too far. But just think about how far it has to go when you want a movie like Jurassic Park to be sent to a military installation in Japan or to Korea or to Okinawa. But anyway, so while the movie came out in June of 1993, oh my gosh, it did not get to the Pacific. Oh man, you know what? I can't really remember how long it took, but I'm gonna go ahead and take a stab. And my parents, they might have to go ahead and remind me, or anybody else who remembers this time. I wanna say it took 3 to 6 months for us to even get Jurassic Park to see it. And when it got to Yokota, when it got to Japan, all these installations, oh my gosh. The line to see Jurassic Park, the first one, I mean, it was a sight. It was a sight. I believe the way that it worked is, you know, you get the reel or you get Jurassic Park and basically it had to go from base to base. More than likely, the place with the highest troop level or the highest amount of people in that demographic, they would get it first. You know, say you got it from a Wednesday to Sunday. You can show it as many times as you could from that Wednesday to Sunday, and then you had to send it off to the next. I'm going to talk about my experience with this movie when I was a kid and how I feel about it now and kind of go back and forth. But I remember it took so long for it to get here. But I remember seeing just the merchandise, the lunch boxes, the clothing, the pajamas, things that were actually in the film that they showed towards the end of the movie. Spoilers also, spoilers. I think Jurassic Park is one of those movies that are being shown, has been shown in a lot of theaters, especially during the pandemic. It's one of those movies you can kind of harken back to. It's like, yes, I remember my first experience. I'd like to see that in the theater again, even though I might already own it on DVD, Blu-ray, VHS, if you remember VHS, or if you stream it on like Netflix or something like that. What was really interesting was how like all this merchandise you would see in the stores, but the movie was just months off from even getting here. And you couldn't really see trailers back then unless you actually went to the movies and then they showed a trailer. So it was really big to see trailers at the movie theater. Now you can just go to YouTube or the studio website and you can see the trailers. It's like so easy, just like, take your phone, you can find it. Back then it was like, no, you definitely could not do that. But you started to see some of this merchandise starting to roll in. It's really pushing it back in the movie even more in anticipation. Like people were just like, golly, all this stuff is rolling in. This must be serious. I'm hearing such great things about it because, wow, you couldn't see a trailer. You could call back home and say, hey, what'd you think about it? Oh my goodness. I tell you what, when you see this, you are going to trip. It is absolutely amazing. So there was whispers about it. Like I said, this was, years ago. There wasn't cable TV overseas. They have what they call as the Armed Forces Network now. Back then it was called FEN, the Far East Network. And it was basically just channeling and cable for the military. So there was no commercials and there was no stateside programming. Anything that was stateside programming, it was tape delayed and it was months old. Anything that you would get from the US were gems. So me and my brother, we were like little kids. We would get VHS tapes from our grandparents that had like Saturday morning cartoons, just hours and hours. Our parents, they would get TV programming and then, they would just ship it to our mail and then we'd watch it and then we'd just be like, oh my goodness, this is what's going on in the States. And that's where you could catch a glimpse of like the trailers or something like that. There are other ways that you could find the trailer, but like I said, I'm just a little kid at this time. But I remember when it got to the theater and the line was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I mentioned this earlier. It was so long. I mean, it was so long. Oh my goodness. But was it worth the wait? Yes, it absolutely was worth the wait because just seeing it as a kid, I'll just talk about a quick takeaway. The takeaway from this movie was obviously the CGI. The computer-generated images for the time is just amazing, and it's not dated. It is still truly amazing to watch the CGI in Jurassic Park, the initial one. And also, what made the film, Steven Spielberg is who directed the movie. I think everyone knows who Steven Spielberg is. John Williams scored the movie, which had some just iconic music that every time you hear that song, you just think, dun, 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 dun. I think everybody knows that theme music from Jurassic Park. The CGI computer-generated images were simply amazing, but combined with the practical effects and like close-up scenes where it may have been a lot more expensive, and what 1993 might have been a little bit harder to make it more real with the CGI. So they used really good practical effects. Jurassic Park actually, I believe, won 3 Academy Awards for visual effects, if I'm not mistaken. So that was a major takeaway. Of course, you had the acting from all the tremendous cast that were in the film. They did a fantastic job. You really felt immense in the danger that was going on. You felt like you were part of it. You wanted them to get through it. They did a really good job of just telling the story and have it progress all the way through to the final scene of the movie, which is just iconic. Watching the movie, I'll kind of go through some of the scenes that I particularly like. So it kind of starts off at this place, Isla Nublar. It's kind of like a fictional location off the coast of Costa Rica. You don't actually see the dinosaur that's in this fortress or this crate or whatnot. They're pushing it into this cage. They show flashes of this particular dinosaur. Later on, we find out it's a velociraptor. They lift up the gate and they have the gatekeeper and the other people associated with, making sure this goes according to plan. So of course, they're setting up certain things with this. They have the pushing team, so they push it up to the gate. The gatekeeper go ahead and he lifts the gate. But then of course, that's when the velociraptor just runs right into the door and knocks down the gatekeeper. And then everything about this scene, it's just kind of terrifying. When I watch it now and then just kind of harping back to when I saw it as a kid, the movie is rated PG-13 and there's not a lot of gore, there's not a lot of blood and stuff like that. There's a lot left up to imagination, and the sound that they use in the movie, it allows you to create your own scenario of what it looks like, what's happening to that particular person who is just on the ground, gets knocked down, and then this velociraptor all of a sudden just picks him up, which you don't see. He's still inside the cage, and then he just gets pulled up from his torso all the way up, and he's still holding on to the outside. And then you see this particular individual, he's kind of in charge. He's the one who's directing everybody to do what they got to do. And you can only imagine what's happening to his torso and his legs. He's being eaten alive. The sound is just, it's just absolutely, I mean, bone chilling. Anyway, the people around, the workers, they start trying to shock the velociraptor, and eventually the keeper there just says, shoot her, just shoot her. They're trying to preserve the dinosaur, trying to preserve the animal, but you know, this is a human being being eaten alive. They start shooting her, and then eventually it just kind of fades off. It runs into this lawyer who is out on a riverbed, and he's going to seek out this archaeologist, I believe. He's trying to get him to come with him to this island to sign off on a park. The setup from before with the velociraptor, obviously this takes place at the park where they're moving these dinosaurs once they're full grown into a habitat where they can control them. And this velociraptor was not having it. After this happened, there's this huge $20 million lawsuit that came from the victims' families. Obviously, he passed away, so the victims' family sued, and then there's a $20 million lawsuit. The lawyer's there, and I guess they, in a nutshell, have agreed to that, all right, look, you can open the park if you get some professionals to go ahead and sign off on it. So the lawyer's there, and he's kind of against the notion of it. He goes to meet this archaeologist to see if he can get him to come with him, and he's just like, nope, I'm not going. He's like, why not? And he's like, I have my reasons. And then he said, what about Alan Grant? Alan Grant is played by Sam Neill, did a tremendous job. He says, you won't get him either. He's like, why not? Because he said, Grant's like me, he's a digger. And then from there, they go to Alan Grant and Ellie. Alan Grant is a, golly, what's the word? Paleontologist and another ontologist. I'm sorry, goodness gracious. Oh, my dinosaur experts out there. I am not one. All right. But anyway, they go to this site where they're digging up dinosaurs. They have just dug up a velociraptor, and they have this new type of technology that beams like sound waves into the ground where they can actually see where the dinosaur bones are at, I believe, if I'm correct. They start making, jokes about, a few more years of development, we won't have to dig anymore. And Alan Grant is like, oh, where's the fun in that? And then they start talking about the velociraptor. There is a particular kid who says the velociraptor is not very scary. So, oh goodness. So, and then at this point, I think it was pretty obvious that Alan Grant and Ellie are a couple. They could be, close friends as well. But when that kid says that, she says, oh no. Because Alan Grant, he keeps this velociraptor like mandible claw on him. He just truly has a love and passion for the velociraptor. You can tell that he has studied this dinosaur, this creature, and he knows exactly what it's about. Now I'm about to get into something that as a kid, I didn't think anything about, but then watching the movie, I guess you kind of can critique it. I don't know if there is an explanation, if it was explained in Michael Crichton's book, but he tells the boy that he should have some respect for this particular animal. Why he says it's not that scary, he said, okay, you think the velociraptor is not that scary, but he's about the size of an ostrich, about 6 feet tall. He's lightly bobbing his head. You think that he's not gonna pick up on you because he can't see you. He says the T-Rex, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, his visual acuity is based upon movement. If you stay still, he won't see you. So as a kid, you're just like, oh man, okay. But what they're doing is, this is for Hollywood. If you're a fan of movies and film, okay, we're gonna get a scene with the T-Rex where he's standing still and they're doing something. They're prepping you for that in the opening scenes of the movie. So it was really good kind of storytelling. But he goes into detail on how the velociraptor hunts. And then like thinking back on it now, I'm like, how do they know that? Like, how do they know? Is there some type of reasonable explanation? Like, because of the dinosaur bones that they have dug, they're just anticipating, they think that this may have been the way. But anyway, it was still interesting to hear him explaining, absolutely terrified his kid. He says, you stare at him, he stares right back at you. And that's when the attack comes. It doesn't come from the front, it comes from the side. The other two raptors were already there. You didn't even know. So it's like they're hunting you. And by the way, you are alive while they start to eat you. They don't just, go for the jugular. No, they take that mandible claw and rip you right across the intestines, or they rip you where you're just bleeding out and you're alive. So that's what he said, have some respect. The kid is just like, okay, oh gosh, golly, he just completely just damaged the kid. But anyway, this is where they put some reinforcement to the relationship between Alan Grant and Ellie. They talk about kids. She's like, did you have to scare him like that? Alan Grant says, you want to have one of those? So then from that point, you're just like, oh, okay, they are together. She's like, well, not that kid, but yes, a form of kid like that. And he's like, oh. She's like, why don't you like kids? She's like, they smell. She's like, what? He's like, baby smell. Oh my goodness gracious. Oh, so that was kind of funny. So right then you can tell, all right, Dr. Grant, while they are together, he's like kind of against, kids right now. But then later on, this moves on to there's a helicopter that comes and they just have a site that they just dug up. It's going to mess up everything. They start yelling at the team to cover up the dig, to make sure they preserve it or whatnot. And then by the time they get to the helicopter, the person that's in there says, go back to your trailer. They go back to their trailer. There's this guy named Dr. Hammond. Once again, this movie takes place in 1993, all right? So there's no social media at all when the internet was just starting to kind of come up. It wasn't far-fetched to know that somebody was famous, but to not have seen him. So, they walk in, Dr. Hammond, he pops some champagne. Grant says, hey, we were saving that. He says, oh, for today, I guarantee it. You were saving it for today. And Ellie comes in, she goes off. She's like, who is this person or whatnot? He says his name, and then he is like world renowned. He has a number of parks and attractions around the world. He has zoos and this, that, and the other. He is famous and extremely rich. So they know who he is. He's the one behind this park, a park that had this $20 million lawsuit. He invites them out to the park to see if they can offer their perspective on it and sign off on the park. And they say, we just have a new dig and, we're really busy. And he says, I'll tell you what, I'll fund your dig because it's really expensive to do digs like this. And they kind of go off as like, and then he says, I'll fund your dig for a further 3 years. Woo, that's how much money this guy has. So then they're just like, where's the plane? So there's other things that are happening with the movie. This character, he works within the park. I'll just say Jurassic Park. I'm trying to kind of give a systematic approach as the movie progresses, but yeah, he works with communications. He handles everything on the computing side of things, the security, everything that has to do with the networking of Jurassic Park. But he has some financial situations, so he's out to make a quick buck. He wants to smuggle embryos from the park to a rival company. So you have the old backdrop of this while Grant and Ellie and Hammond are going to be going to the park to see what it's all about. You also have this in the background running like, okay, he got some shenanigans going on that coincides with them going to the park, trying to have a good experience. He is potentially just going to really destroy everything, which we all know absolutely happened. So, and then, you got the helicopter, and that's the first time you meet Dr. Ian Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum, one of those characters you always will remember. I swear he steals almost every scene that he's in. He is a scene stealer now. Sam Neill is a tremendous actor too. He has some scene stealers in Jurassic Park because he's just so cool and so sly, the way his lines just come out of his mouth. They're in the helicopter, and that's when you hear that first iconic music come up, and they're descending, and it's kind of like a free fall, and you have the whole scene with Dr. Grant where he's trying to get the seatbelt on, and then Dr. Hammond's like, look, by the time you get the seatbelt on, we'd have already landed. Then he just grabs two of the same ends and ties it up, and then he's like, okay, and he has his iconic hat with his sunglasses on, and man, I remember seeing the toys for Jurassic Park, and I'm thinking, man, you know what, look at all these toys. This movie has got to be dope. It's got to be great. It's got to be fantastic. It's got to be super, and it was. So anyway, they get there, and then they show them getting in the Jeep, and the gate closed, and it's like 10,000 volts. I think it says keep out or something like that. Towards the end of the movie, that's like one of the last things you see. It's like, you should have never came in the first place. So then they're going to start the tour. But before they start the tour, they go to this open area, and they don't know what they're going to see. He just says, look, I have this biological reserve, and our attractions are going to blow your mind. You're not going to believe what you see. So they're like, okay. So during the Jeep, Ellie is looking at this plant. She's like saying, this plant is from the Cretaceous period, millions of years old. How the heck is it even here? While she's talking about this plant, Dr. Grant is up just looking up in the air, and then seeing it in the movie theater. Once again, I was really young. I'm just like, what the heck is going on? What is he looking at? And then they cut to a wide scene, and you see this dinosaur, and I think it was a Brachiosaurus or Brontosaurus, whichever one of the two it was, but with the long neck. That was the first time anybody had seen an image like that on a movie theater that just looked so real. It's completely computer generated, and for my youngin behind at that time, I was just like, those are robots. Oh my gosh, those are robots. And then later on, I was like, oh no, yeah, it's computer generated imagery. And I was just like, that just looks so real and so cool. Is this what video games are going to look like soon? In my kid mind, that's exactly, I was like, I can't wait till video games get this way. Oh my gosh. But then Dr. Grant, he starts to ask Dr. Hammond questions, just like, what is it, about 30-foot neck? And then he gives like the actual dimensions of the dinosaur he's looking at. How fast are they? And then Hammond just comes out of nowhere and says, well, we clocked the T-Rex at 32 miles an hour. Come again? Did you say you have a T-Rex? He's like, we have a T-Rex. And then he just loses it. He has to put his head in between his knees as Ellie tells him to. And then he says, Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sadler, welcome to Jurassic Park. And then they do another wide shot where there's more dinosaurs using this truly believable and utterly just amazing CGI of the dinosaurs just flocking, and they're flocking like birds. And Dr. Grant is like, they're moving in herds. They do move in herds. From there, they ask, how did you do this? And then they get into the tour where they go to the visitor center where you can see they have a Tyrannosaurus Rex bone sculpture there. That's where they meet the kids, Tim and Lex, which Dr. Hammond says that is their target audience. Why wouldn't it be their target audience? I remember how infatuated I was with dinosaurs. I think we all can during a certain time as we were growing up. So they came down, and mind you, Dr. Grant doesn't really take the kids, so he just like, kids, oh my goodness gracious, responsibility I do not want to deal with. Anyway, one of the kids, Timmy, he's a big fan of Dr. Grant, but he doesn't particularly agree with his notions on some of the things, and he just kind of challenges them. And then Grant is just like, why is this like 10-year-old kid, questioning me about, what I think is correct or whatnot. So anyway, they go on the tour, and it's supposed to be a ride, but they basically describe how they were able to create the dinosaurs, because all the doctors there are just like, how in the world did they do this? Where do you get 65 million year DNA? Where does the source come from? So then they have this really simplified and neat way of explaining to the audience, and also explaining to whoever's going to eventually go through this tour as they're going through it, of how it happened. And basically, years ago, you had the dinosaurs. In the movie, they'd show the cartoon of mosquito sucking blood out of a dinosaur, and then it would get stuck on the tree from the amber, it would roll down, and it would get fossilized over years. And then Jurassic Park scientists dug up those fossilized mosquitoes, removed the DNA, and then they had dino DNA. Now, in creating the dinosaur, there's holes in the DNA sequence, so they had to use a complete DNA of a frog to complete the code, and that's how they were able to create the dinosaurs. Really fast, really quick, really simple way to explain it. Could it really happen? I don't know. I'm not an expert, but it definitely worked for Hollywood. And Michael Crichton also explained that in his book. I didn't actually read the book, but he did sign off and help to adapt the screenplay for a movie. But during the tour, as they're explaining this, they go past a place where you can see the dinosaurs hatch. The doctor's there. They wanted to see what was happening, so they actually stopped the tour, lifted the seats up, and got out and left. And the lawyer who was there was just like, can they do that? And he's already amazed. Like, he's the one that's like, no, you're not going to have this park up and running. You had a $20 million lawsuit. This person passed away. And I guess he hasn't seen, what happened. He's just heard whispers about it. But then once he saw those dinosaurs, he's like, we're going to make a fortune off this place. Anyway, they go there and you meet the infamous Dr. Wu, who you'll see later on in other Jurassic Park movies years down the road. That's when they explain that all the dinosaurs are female, they're unable to breed, and that Dr. Hammond has been there for the hatching of every dinosaur. They imprint on him and whatnot. Dr. Grant's actually holding an egg that actually hatches while they're there. It's like perfect timing. And it just so happens to be a velociraptor. And then he's just like, you've bred raptors? And then Dr. Wu is like, yes, we have. They ain't messing around. So far, you've seen the velociraptor in the beginning of the movie, just vaguely through the cage. Then you saw the brachiosaurus or the brontosaurus and some other dinosaurs. And now you see the baby velociraptor fully hatched. This is also a time where you hear Jeff Goldblum's character, Dr. Malcolm, say that, basically he's a mathematician, he's a chaos theorist. I still don't know what the heck that is. But his character is all about, life will find a way. Things change. And you never know. And then Dr. Wu is like, are you saying that these dinosaurs are going to breed? And he's just like, I'm just saying that life will find a way or whatever. And then they're just like, oh, okay, all right. From there, they go to the velociraptor paddock, where they meet the person from the first scene in the movie when one of the workers passed away. Bob Peck, he played Robert Muldoon and he was a gamekeeper in the Jurassic Park movie. So he was from the first scene, he was the one who was yelling out, shoot her, and calling out the directions of the people of what they need to do to get the Velociraptor into the cage, which didn't work out too great. But anyway, they get to the Velociraptor paddock, and Dr. Grant, being the enthusiast that he is about the Velociraptor, starts asking him questions about the Velociraptor. And he's talking about, are they smart? He's like, yes, they have problem-solving intelligence. He talks about their agility. They have an astonishing jump. How fast do they run? He said cheetah speed. He's like 50, 60 miles an hour if they get out in the open. Whether it's movies down the road or if it's for scenes down the road, they're prepping you like, okay, look, this is what these dinosaurs can do. You have been notified. So be ready for later on in the movie. But before they actually get out and actually tour the actual park, they have this nice, elegant dinner laid out for them. But before then, they have this cow that they're bringing up to the paddock. The girl, Lexi, she looks at the cow and is just like, what are we going to do with the cow? Oh, we're feeding it. What the heck? A whole cow? Also, when I mentioned earlier that the Velociraptors were, problem-solving intelligent, the gamekeeper had said that they were testing defenses for weaknesses systematically, even though they can get electrocuted by it. They remember, okay, not to do that again. So they are smart. Anyway, they cut away from that scene and they're eating dinner after they watch this cow just get completely mauled by these Velociraptors. There was like a full pack of Velociraptors, but they said there was one female Velociraptor that took the pride of the pack and killed all but two of the others. So there was only 3 Velociraptors left. But they cut away and then they start talking about, what do you think about the park so far? And while they think it's amazing, Alan Grant, Ellie, and Dr. Malcolm all believe that it's probably a little bit too much for what the world is ready for. So Ian Malcolm and Dr. Hammond kind of go on this bit for a little bit where Ian is just like, look, you've kind of toyed with this genetic power and you don't know what you're doing with it. You're just leaning on the power or leaning on the intelligence of other people and you're not even taking responsibility for it. You're just like, oh, look, this is what I can do, but you're not realizing that this is serious. Hammond goes and he says, well, look, if we were to use this genetic power to create a flock of condors, which is on the verge of extinction, and then Ian Malcolm stops him, he's like, no. The dinosaurs had their time and nature chose them for extinction. What you're doing is kind of godly-like, and, it's something that we're probably not ready for. Dr. Sadler, she kind of seconds the notion, these are dangerous animals and they will defend themselves. What can we expect? And then Dr. Grant puts the nail in the coffin and just says, one of the more iconic scenes, just the way that he talks and everything. He's just like, look, I don't want to draw any conclusions, but man and dinosaur, after 65 million years, have just been thrusted back together. How can we have the slightest idea what to expect? And then he kind of looks around. And then Dr. Hammond is like, look, y'all come down here. Y'all supposed to defend me, and sign off on the park. And the only person that is signed off right now is the blood-sucking lawyer. Anyway, from there, it kind of escalates. You see some things with Ned, his character. He's a slob, the visitor center in his office. He has financial problems. That's the reason why he's trying to smuggle these embryos out to this rival company. What really messes up everything is that there's this storm that's coming, and he has to make this boat or this dock to get the embryos there. If he doesn't get it there, he's not going to get paid or whatnot. So the storm really messes up everything. So he has to improvise, and by improvising, he really screws everything up. He ends up messing with the computer system, turns off these systems that enables dinosaurs to get out of their cages while the group is going on the tour. So Alan Grant, Dr. Sadler, Ian Malcolm, Lexi, Timmy, and the lawyer are all in the 2 vans, and they're being strung along through automation, and you have the big door that says welcome to Jurassic Park, and then Ian's like, what, they got King Kong in there? Now they got something, King Kong ain't in there, but it might as well have been King Kong. But as they progress through the park, the first paddock they kind of run into is the Dilophosaurus, and the computer talks about what the Dilophosaurus is all about, but it's a no-show. It doesn't show up. They're like, dang it, man, this sucks. And then the next one they get to is to the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it's this huge, massive paddock. And then they bring up a goat out of the floor. And then Lexi, the girl, is like, he's gonna eat the goat? And then the goat is just sitting there, just like, oh, well, no one's coming. I guess I'm just going to chill out. And it's another no-show. And meanwhile, back at the visitor center, they're looking at the cameras that are placed inside the van. And then they see Ian Malcolm. He's like, hello. So eventually you will have dinosaurs on your dino tour in Jurassic Park, hello. And Dr. Hammond's like, I really hate that guy. Goodness gracious. But anyway, yeah, they're going on the tour, and then Dr. Grant sees something from across the yard or whatnot. And he just gets out of the van, and he sees like there's this sick Triceratops. Everyone follows him, and then the kids are there. There's this really cute scene. He told Timmy to stay put, and Timmy just said, no, I'm gonna go check it out. But the girl, Lexi, she acted like she fell, and then he grabbed her and said, you okay? And she just used it as an excuse to hold his hand. But then when they got just close enough, he said, everybody stay put. And then he walked closer to the scene, and then Timmy was like, no, I'm going. Actually, the Triceratops, while he is infatuated with the Velociraptor, growing up as a kid, the Triceratops was his favorite dinosaur. So it was kind of a heartfelt moment to see that dinosaur. Now, this dinosaur, there was no CGI involved with this, I believe. It was all practical effects, and it looked real on film. And it was nice to see how they interacted. There was a scene where Grant was up against the stomach, and he breathed, or she breathed, and you could see him kind of just like, oh man. And then Dr. Sadler was crying there. And then around this time, you can start to see when the storm is starting to come in. And then it cuts away to Ned, and he's talking to somebody on the dock saying, hey, there's no promises. We'll wait as long as we can, but the storm is coming. You got to get here. And then he said, look, I did test runs. I can make it in this time. Maybe I can push it to this amount of time. He said, no promises. So then that's when he has to really start escalating everything. He just really screws up. But he gets the embryos. He gets the Jeep, and then he starts to progress through the park. He's driving and it's just raining. It's a tropical storm. It's like a cyclone or a hurricane or something, whatever it is, whatever they call it. But he's just going through it. It's muddy. There's just water everywhere. He's not paying attention because he wears glasses. His glasses are starting to fog up, and he tries to clear it up. He hits something, and then he gets stuck where the Dilophosaurus paddock is. He's trying to get to the dock. He actually got lost. When he got stuck, he found the right directions, and he was right there. He was almost there. He had connected Jeep to a tree with the rope to help pull himself out of where he was stuck at. But the Dilophosaurus was there, and then actually the dinosaur is kind of cute, and he's just kind of like, he's like, oh, you're not so bad. In the tour previously, it tells you how the Dilophosaurus basically gets down. It shoots this venom that paralyzes you while it starts to eat you. So it doesn't look all that scary at first, but then when it opens up and you see like its face just kind of going, it's like, oh man, horror movie, hold up, what the heck is going on? So anyway, he figures out a way to get himself out of there. He gets up to this hill, he turns around, and he gets sprayed in the face with this venom. I forgot to mention, he had his glasses, but when he was going down the hill, he slipped and he lost his glasses. And he's just like, where are my glasses? And he's like, I can afford more glasses. Yeah, if he gets these embryos there, I'm pretty sure he's going to get paid. But he doesn't have his glasses, so the glasses can't, block the venom. So anyway, he gets sprayed in the face with the venom. And then, he tries to get into the Jeep anyway, and then he hits his head on the top of the Jeep, and then the embryos in the canister comes out of his pocket and then rolls down. And I remember being in the theater at that time, and it was like a collective just like, oh, you messed up everybody in this park for nothing. It's fitting to go down. But then, he gets in the Jeep. Of course, at this time, you start to remember, isn't he going to be paralyzed? Eventually, he gets sprayed in the eyes, but he's still slowly but surely, I guess it happens. The dinosaur was in there just waiting for him, and then he just starts getting eaten. And then you see the mud just come over the canister, and it's like, oh, that's that. That is that. Of course, back at the visitor center, they start noticing all the systems are going down, and the power gets shut down. And coincidentally, not just for Hollywood, not just for the sake of scenes, of probably one of the best action scenes ever. I don't know. Is it too much to say that? For me, it is. For me, it is one of the best action scenes. It's one of the ones I grew up with. But when the two cars get stuck outside of the Tyrannosaurus Rex paddock and the power's off, they're just like, what's going on? Okay, maybe it's, it's just a minor thing that's going off, right? Oh, no. It was not that. You have the kids and the lawyer, they're in one car, and then you have Grant and Ian Malcolm in another, and then Dr. Sadler actually went back with one of the workers because she wanted to stay back with the Triceratops to see what was wrong, see if she could help. So before all the workers got on the boat to get back to where they need to get to before the storm hit, he dropped her off at the visitor center. So they got back at the visitor center, and then the gamekeeper is just like, are the Velociraptor ones shut off? And then Samuel L. Jackson, I forgot to mention Samuel L. Jackson. This is like kind of the beginnings of when he just turned into this fantastic character actor. And he was basically in like almost every movie for like a 10, 15, 20 year span or whatnot. But he just had an iconic role in this. And I think everybody remembers him saying, hold on to your butts, in that dang cigarette. Oh my gosh. That dang cigarette, he'd be talking. You just see that cigarette just flapping up and down. Goodness gracious. But anyway, he was like, okay, the Velociraptor ones are not turned off. Why the heck would we turn off the other ones? And then from there, you see they stopped in front of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. The goat that was there previously is not there. And then you see like a goat leg, torso, or vertebrae hit the car. And what really led up to everything is the iconic just, booming from the Tyrannosaurus Rex as it got closer. So you hear the boom, and then you see the water ripple. There's a glass of water in the car, and you see the water start to ripple, and you're just like, oh my gosh. And you haven't seen the Tyrannosaurus Rex yet. The only Tyrannosaurus Rex you've seen is the symbol for the Jurassic Park logo. So the lawyer, how brave he is, he gets absolutely scared to death when he catches a glimpse of this dinosaur, and he leaves the car and runs to the bathroom and closes the door and just leaves the kids in the car. And then Dr. Ian Malcolm and Dr. Grant are in the other car, and they're looking, they're just like, where the heck does he think he's going? And then they're just like, you gotta go to the bathroom evidently. And then all of a sudden you start to see the electrical fence is supposed to be having all this power run through it, so there's no power to it. The dinosaur just rips it apart. Then there's this whole scene with the Tyrannosaurus Rex that ensues. And I remember being a kid in that movie theater. I was a little scared. I was scared. I was just like, oh my God. Okay, it's PG-13. They're not going to completely gross you out and have all this blood and everything. But everybody remembers when the dinosaur went and got to the lawyer. Oh my goodness. The kids just being kids. Timmy, he seemed to be the smart one. And I don't care what anybody says. I remember being in a movie theater or just watching it with friends and other people later on through the years. You'd be like, what is the girl doing? I would not do that. Why are you doing it? Why are you shining the light? I'm telling you something right now. Not that I have ever been in a situation like that, but I've spoken with people who have known people who have been in situations, in dire situations, and you truly never know how you're going to react. I don't know if I would react that way, but you can tell what being scared can do to people, because for some reason she grabbed the light and she was shining the light, and the Tyrannosaurus was attracted to the light, and Timmy was like, turn the light off. The Tyrannosaurus Rex is attracted to movement, so they're moving, so he sees these things moving in the car. So then he starts tearing the car apart, flips the car over, and then at that point, Dr. Grant, he gets out, there's a flare in his car, he lights his flare, he gets the Tyrannosaurus Rex attention, and then he kind of goes from left to right, and the dinosaur's looking, and he throws it, he keeps absolutely still. Then Ian Malcolm does the same thing, except instead of throwing the flare, he starts running with it. So the Tyrannosaurus Rex starts running after him, and then he tries to throw the flare, but then at that point, he's like, I'm not gonna follow that flare. I see you, you're still moving. You're much bigger than that flare. I'm gonna start following you. So he follows him, he basically runs into him, hits him, and really messes him up. It's where the bathroom is at. So now, where the doctor had been hiding, he's fully exposed. And he's just sitting there on the toilet. And, oh my gosh. So then the Tyrannosaurus, comes right in, his teeth completely engulf half of his body, and then he just starts shaking him. Everybody in the movie theater was just like, ah! Man. Oh my goodness. Ian Malcolm, he's out of commission, but so he was covered, so you couldn't see him, so he wasn't moving. So the Tyrannosaurus just forgot about him. But then Grant went back to go get the kids, and then the car was flipped upside down. They're all in mud. Timmy's pinned under the car, and then Lexi is just like, what the heck's going on? And then the Tyrannosaurus comes back, and then she starts yelling. She starts screaming, and then he puts his hand over her mouth and says, don't move. He can't see us if we don't move. Steven Spielberg and his visual effects team, they've gone back and forth between computer-generated imagery for wide shots and then close-ups are doing practical effects. So when they cut to the shot where Tyrannosaurus Rex is directly in front, that's a practical element. Life-size Tyrannosaurus Rex breathing, and you see the water coming off and everything. And he breathed and his hat came off. You're just like, you don't know what's going to happen. You're like, is he going to bite his head off? Is he going to bite his arm off? Is he going to bite a limb off? Eventually, they get away. The car where the paddock's at, there is a cliff or whatnot that they go down. So there's this whole scene where Grant and Lexi, they're hanging onto an electrical cord and they're swinging from left to right, trying to get out of the way of the car, which the Tyrannosaurus Rex is pushing down. And Timmy is inside the car because he was pinned in there. So then the car gets pushed all the way down off the cliff into these trees, and then it cuts away. Back at the visitor center, they're still trying to figure out what the heck's going on. There's code that Ned put in. Samuel L. Jackson's character is like, I hate this hacker crap. Why is this happening? I think I could try to get back into the system, but let's see what happens. So then he tries to get in there, and then it's this backdoor that he programmed into it. They couldn't get in. So it says, ah-ha-ha, you didn't say the magic word. Ah-ha-ha, ah-ha-ha. Then they basically just get locked out of the system. So now they can't do anything. And from this point, Dr. Hammond, he looks at the gamekeeper and is like, hey, could you go bring back my grandchildren? So he said yes. And then Dr. Sadler says that she will go with them. So then they go back to where the whole Tyrannosaurus Rex thing happened. And they find Dr. Ian Malcolm. They pick him up. They put him in the Jeep. And then where the car previously had fallen down into the trees, later on, there was another scene where Dr. Grant told Lexi to just stay down and he's going to go up and get Timmy. And she's tripping. She's just like, he left us. And he said, that's not what I'm going to do. He goes up, he gets Timmy, and then Timmy is afraid of heights. Really a strong spirit, but he's just afraid of heights for whatever reason. So he's just sitting there and he's just like, Grant is like, you okay? He's like, yeah. They get him out of the car, and then the car starts to slip from all the branches and everything. It's not stable at all. So then they start climbing down as quickly as they can and just manage to make it before the car is able to hit them. It actually hit the ground and it fell over them, and they crawled out. So that was really cool. But then to get back to Dr. Sadler and the gamekeeper, they picked up Ian Malcolm, they put him in the Jeep, and then they saw where the car was. So then, I don't know how they got down there, but they saw where they were after the car had dropped all the way down to the bottom. And then they show Sadler showing 3 different footprints. They know that they're alive. This is when things really pick up, because Dr. Malcolm, and I don't know why, but when you think about it, they left him alone in that Jeep, and then they went down to go check on him. So Malcolm is just like, he's kind of incapacitated and knocked out. He starts to wake up, and you start hearing that boom, boom. And then you start seeing the lights, and the gamekeeper and Dr. Sadler are running. And then he says, no, we got to go. We got to go right now, Dr. Malcolm. And then you see the Tyrannosaurus Rex just running. And then as soon as you see him running, you're like, okay, he can only run 35 miles an hour. So as long as they can get this Jeep up to more than 35 miles an hour, it should be okay. But it's a stick shift, and Ian Malcolm is in the back, and he's completely stretched out. And while they're trying to get away from the Tyrannosaurus Rex, he's right on them. It cuts away to the rearview mirror, and it says things may seem closer than they appear. Oh, no crap. He runs into the shifter. So then they slow down, and the Tyrannosaurus Rex is like catching up. But then he moves, he puts it into whatever gear it is or whatnot, and then they just outrun it. And then the Tyrannosaurus Rex is like, okay, all right, whatever. They get back to the compound, and after a bit, they decide that, hey, probably the only way that we can get everything back online is to completely reboot the system. It's not something that they really want to do because Dr. Hammond thinks they should reboot the system. Samuel L. Jackson's character says no because it might not come back on. We've never done this before, not the entire system. But anyway, they decided to do it, and once they reboot the system, it says system ready. He says it works, and then Dr. Malcolm is just like, what do you mean it works? Everything's still off. They're like, no, it's in standby. So all I have to do is just go down to the compound. In 3 minutes, I can have everything up and running. And of course, oh really, 3 minutes? Oh my goodness gracious. We know what's gonna happen here. And then also during this time, you mentioned earlier that Dr. Grant, he's not really too fond of kids, but he's put in a situation where he has to watch out for these kids and take care of them. So it was really warm to see him interact with the two kids, and he took care of them. There was a really nice scene with a brontosaurus or I don't know which brachiosaurus or brontosaurus, whichever one. And there's a scene where Timmy was like, it looks like she has a cold, and like, oh yeah, it looks like it. And they're all the way up in this tree engaging with this dinosaur. And then Lexi, who is the scaredy cat of everything, decides to conjure up enough strength to pet the dinosaur. And then the dinosaur, he sneezes and then she is completely covered with snot, just snot everywhere. So they sleep the night in Jurassic Park out there in the wild, amongst all these wild dinosaurs. None of the fences are working, or at least the Velociraptor ones are still up. Getting back to them having to reboot the system, Samuel L. Jackson's character goes to turn on the switchboard or whatnot to get everything up and running again. They don't say how long it's been, but it looks like it was longer than like 15, 20 minutes. So it being that long, the gamekeeper and Dr. Sadler decide to go ahead and go to the compound themselves and see what happened and get this fixed. That's when they get outside the visitor center and they realize that when they rebooted the system, the Velociraptors, they're really smart. They noticed something. They broke through their paddock when the power went off. So they're out just roaming around. 3 Velociraptors. So then they're just like, oh crap. Meanwhile, catching up with Dr. Grant, Timmy, and Lexi, after sleeping the night in Jurassic Park, they're going through. Dr. Grant finds eggs. Timmy and Lexi are like, yo, I thought Grandpa said that all the dinosaurs were females. He said, yeah, but he said Dr. Malcolm was white. Life will find a way. They use amphibian DNA, but some West African frogs, I believe, are known to change sex in a single sex environment. So they use that type of DNA. Basically, they evolved and they started having babies on their own. So they went from female to male, and they show the tracks. So evidently, dinosaurs are breeding on this island. This would support another movie and other movies, because now it's like, okay, they have adapted, they've evolved, and they had this thing that they put in the dinosaurs. They had to have lysine. If they didn't have that particular thing, then they would slip into a coma and die. Like some type of ingredient that they had to have in their diet. If not, then they couldn't survive. And that's what they use as a measure of control. But in seeing this, you're just like, oh dang, all right, well that was worthless. They'll survive and breed on their own now because, Mother Nature. Progressing on through the movie, they get to a wide open place in the park where there's these dinosaurs. And Timmy, like I said, he's really knowledgeable about dinosaurs in general. Grant asks him what type of dinosaur that is, because they're running all together. He said they're running like they're avoiding a predator. He said, yeah, that's a gala something, galamitis or galamitis. Once again, it's a gala something. He said, yeah, they're flocking like they're evading a predator. And then Timmy's like, they're flocking this way. And if you ever saw the trailer, this was actually in the trailer. You see them running. And this is where you really get to see the CGI really work very well, because they're running and there's a whole bunch of dinosaurs running next to them. This, I believe, really helped sell the movie and get people to the theaters. But when he said that they're flocking like they were evading a predator, just so happened to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex that was chasing them and came out of the woodwork and just completely mauled this dinosaur and started eating. And then they were hiding behind this tree, and then Lexi is like, hey, can we leave now? He said, but you never look at birds the same way again. She's like, really, can we leave? He's like, okay, stay low and follow me. And then Timmy is like, oh, look at how much blood. And then Grant grabs him, and they go about their way. But they actually make it back to the visitor center. And then Dr. Grant says, okay, I'm gonna go look for everybody else. Now, when Dr. Sadler and the gamekeeper went to go turn on the power in the compound, Dr. Hammond and Ian Malcolm were still kind of chilling out in the visitor center at that time. But when the gamekeeper and Dr. Sadler saw that the Velociraptor compound had been opened up by those 3 Velociraptors, the gamekeeper, as they progressed into the compound, Dr. Sadler said that, hey, I see the compound, I think we can make it. And he's like, no, we can't. And then she's like, why? He said, because we're being hunted. And he said, it's okay, you go ahead and run for the compound. I got her. And he sees one. But then, right when you see one, everybody in the movie theater is just like, okay, so if Dr. Grant knows that these Velociraptors, for whatever reason, why he knows this, but they went out of their way to explain this just for this particular scene, that you think you have the dinosaur, but the attack is coming from the side. So he's looking at this one, like he's the gamekeeper. He's the one who explained to Alan Grant certain things about the Velociraptor, about the astonishing jump, how fast they run, how smart they are. And then he doesn't know that these damn Velociraptors are coming from the damn side? That don't make no damn sense. But it was an awesome scene, and I thank you, Steven Spielberg, for that bit. But anyway, so Dr. Sadler makes a run for the compound, and I'll tell you something right now. Talking about some chicken skins, some goosebumps. When she was running, like the music behind that when she was running, and it just stopped right when she closed that door. She was running, jumping over logs and this, that, and the other. And you're just like, oh man, this Velociraptor is gonna come out of nowhere and just completely take her leg apart. But it didn't get to her. She got to the compound, and then you don't know what happens with the gamekeeper. But she gets to the compound, and Dr. Hammond is trying to explain to her how to get to the switchboard or to the circuit breaker. And he's doing just an absolute, just abysmal job. He doesn't know how to read a plan. He's just this rich guy who had a fantastic idea that now he's just like, let me try to help out with everything that's gone horrible. Let me try to help out at some point. But Ian Malcolm, he's just like, give me the dang map. And then he just completely simplifies it. He knows how to read a diagram. He's like, okay, look up, you see the lead piping, follow the lead piping to this and go there, take a left, blah, 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 you'll see it. And then she finds it like that. And then from there, Hammond, knowing exactly what she has to do, and of course having the manual there, she tells her how to turn all the systems back on. First, she has to charge the breaker. So she has to pump it 3 times. She pumps it, she charges it, and then she presses a button to turn on the system that's going to turn on the individual fences so that it can get the dinosaurs back locked up or whatnot, When she presses that button at this time, before Grant, Timmy, and Lexi get back to the visitor center, they have to get past this paddock, and they have to climb over this fence that's supposed to be electrified, but because the power's off, it's okay. They can climb over the fence. It's funny is that Grant takes a stick, he throws it up against the electrical fence, and nothing happens. And then he grabs the fence and he starts acting like he's getting electrocuted, and they all start screaming. And then he's just like, hey, everything's okay. And then Lexi's like, that was not funny. And then Tim is like, that was great. Then they start to climb over. Mind you, Lexi, this is probably one of the few times where she's like, okay, I can do this. I'm strong. She climbs over that fence, and Dr. Grant climbs over that fence, and Tim is afraid of heights, so he's going just slow as molasses. But at the same time that they're climbing over this fence, Dr. Sadler is in the compound, and she's slowly pressing the power on buttons for each paddock. They're at the Tyrannosaurus paddock on the opposite side, trying to get over it to get back to the visitor center. So Grant and Lexi are already on the ground and buzzing, saying that, hey, the power is about to come back on. And then they're telling you, look, you need to jump because you're about to get electrocuted if you don't jump or climb back over as quickly as possible. He's like, are you crazy? I'm not going to jump. Eventually they get down to the Tyrannosaurus paddock. She presses the button, and just as she presses it, they started the countdown. They're saying, jump on 3. 1, 2, and then right before they get to 3, she presses the button, it cuts away, you just see him let go, and then he starts flying, and he flies right into Dr. Grant's arms, and he's passed out. And then all of the power starts coming on, and then she says, I think we're back in business. She's like really happy, and then a velociraptor, probably the most terrifying jump scare of the movie, just comes out of the back of where she's at, and just the whole movie theater just what? And then she's like, oh my goodness, she starts running. She gets to like a closet or something like that. And then you see Samuel L. Jackson's character, his arm just kind of comes over, and she's like, oh my gosh. And then she turns around and it's just only an arm. This velociraptor ate that dude. And it was only his arm. Oh my gosh. So then she actually manages to get away, and she actually locks that velociraptor in the compound. So now instead of having 3 velociraptors, there's 2. Unfortunately for the gamekeeper, he didn't take his own advice, or he didn't know how the velociraptors hunt, even though he was explaining, like I mentioned before, to Alan Grant about everything that velociraptor has to offer. But he had the velociraptor like right in front, and then another one just came out right next to his head, and then he's like, clever girl. Turns, tries to shoot her, and velociraptor just tore him up. Once again, it's rated PG-13. It wasn't a lot of blood. They used plants and like trees to kind of cover what's going on, but you got the idea of what was going on. And then, like I said earlier in the movie, Alan Grant said it uses this retractable mandible claw to scrape out the belly. You can see where the velociraptor had his face on the gamekeeper's face, and then that mandible claw was just here, just ripping into his stomach and his intestines. Just, ugh, golly. Anyway, Dr. Grant did CPR, and Timmy came back to, and then when he woke up, it was really funny. He said 3. And then they got back to the visitor center, and mind you, they had been out. Who knows how long it had been since they had eaten. At the visitor center, they had this spread of all these cakes and desserts and food and everything. So I remember being in the theater and everybody looking just like, oh my gosh, I would kill that right about now. And that's exactly what they started to do. Dr. Grant went to go look for other people. He found Dr. Sadler, who just came out of the compound, and told him to run. She ran towards him, they hugged. And then they went back to the visitor center. And when Dr. Sadler went to the compound and the power had turned on, Dr. Hammond and Ian Malcolm, they moved to an emergency bunker just to make sure, things would be safe while the power was off. So they made it there, and then Sadler and Grant, they went to go look for the kids. But while the kids were eating all that food in the visitor center, or in the kitchen, or wherever they were, the scene where Lexi, she had some Jello, and then she was just shaking. The Jello was just shaking, and then you're just like, oh no, what is going on? And then there was a velociraptor behind Timmy. So then they were just like, oh, we gotta get out of here. We gotta run to the kitchen. That's another great scene. This is when actually again they move back and forth between practical effects and then special effects. They get into the kitchen and they're running, trying to avoid velociraptors. Lexi being the big sister, there's a time where she actually uses herself as bait, and it looks like she's actually about to get taken out by the velociraptor. The dinosaur ends up just running into the mirror image of her. They get away, they grab Timmy. The other velociraptor is running after them, and they end up running into a fridge, and it's really slippery in there. The dinosaur slips and runs in there, and then they close the door on them, and then they start running out to the main part of the visitor center, where they run back into Grant and Sadler. And then the 4 of them go into the computer room. They've cut the power on, but then they have to turn on the system. So it's like, if you have a circuit breaker, okay, you cut it on, but then if you want, the light in the bedroom to be on, you got to go turn it on. So they get to the door, and then Dr. Grant is just like, hey, Ellie, turn on the door locks, because, okay, Velociraptor, we don't think you can open the door, but you never know. And then as soon as she said turn on the door locks, the Velociraptor is right up there at the door, puts his hand on the door, and opens the door and pushes it. And then Dr. Grant has a gun. He drops the gun. He's like, oh, I got to keep this dang door closed. And Ellie leaves the computer, comes over, and then starts helping him. And then he's like, give me the gun. I got to move. If I move, this dinosaur's going to get in here. We're all dead. So then Lexi, it's like a particular system. I think she said a Unix system. She's like, wait a minute, I know this. And it's all kind of like a virtual reality, not really a virtual reality. Like if you go back and you watch the movie, you can see 3D imaging was something that was kind of revolutionary and kind of cool back in 1993. So she's using a mouse and she's kind of like hovering over the park files as far as the computers, the security and everything. And she's just kind of navigating with the mouse through there. All the while, this dang door is fitting to be opened up by this velociraptor. And Timmy, what the hell was Timmy doing? Dr. Grant is like, give me the gun, give me the gun. And Timmy is just like at the computer right next to his sister, just like, hurry up, hurry up. I'm like, you shouldn't mess with the gun. Who knows what's gonna happen? But then in hindsight, when I look at it, I'm like, he totally just could have got the gun and gave it to him. But not that it would have helped, because I guarantee you somebody was gonna die. They just let the door down and then try to shoot the dinosaur. But anyway, Lexi found the right file, turned on all the systems, and coincidentally, they got the door shut right as the door locks were engaged. From there, Dr. Hammond and Dr. Malcolm were in the emergency bunker. As far as they know, there's still no power, right? But then all of a sudden they get a call and they're just like, oh, wait a minute, phone call, what? And then it's Dr. Grant. And then he said, Dr. Hammond, the phones are working. Go ahead and call whoever you need to call and tell them to get the helicopter. We'll be there shortly. And he said, how are the kids? He said, the kids are fine. They go ahead and they call who they need to call. The helicopter shows up later on in the movie, but they still have an issue because the velociraptor can't now open the door because the door locks are just too strong for it to open. But it tries to go through the window, and it doesn't show it go through the window, but you just hear Ellie in the background just saying, oh my gosh, it's trying to go through the window. And then Grant tries to shoot it with these bullets. He uses up all the bullets and you can see, okay, he didn't hit it. But then they get back into another part of the visitor center where the initial part of the tour happened. They use a ladder to get up to the top part of this complex, and they kick the ladder down so that the velociraptor can't climb up to it. It can see where they're crawling above in the corridors or whatnot. And what it does is it jumps up and it hits one of them. And then Lexi is there and she falls, but doesn't fall completely. She's holding on. The velociraptor is on the ground. And it's probably just one of the most gut-wrenching scenes in the movie, because at this point you're really vested in the characters. And the actress that played Lexi, which is Ariana Richards, she did an absolutely fantastic job. Her emotional response to everything in this movie is just spot on. And I can only imagine how difficult it had to be, being is that they were going to be using CGI for a lot of it. And then what helped, of course, they had the practical elements as well. But you see the dinosaur, you're looking down on it, you know, they're trying to pull her back up. And the dinosaur, the velociraptor, is just getting up. She gets pulled up just in the nick of time, and that dinosaur was about this close away from snapping everything from her knee down and bringing her down and bringing down anybody else who was attached to her who was trying to help her out. Eventually they get away. They get to the main area where the Tyrannosaurus Rex bone structure is, and they're up on a higher level, but then there's two velociraptors. Who knows which velociraptor got out, because evidently Ellie locked a velociraptor in the compound. It's not really known whether that one got out. You know about the one that was chasing them. Okay, that one found them, but then there was another one that was locked in the refrigerator. So it must have been that one that got out. But anyway, there's two velociraptors, and they jump on the bone structure and it just completely collapses and they all fall down to the ground. There's a whole scene where Dr. Grant is standing in front of Ellie and the kids, and he's just prepared to just sacrifice his life, or be the first one to go. I should say, be the first one to go before they're all just completely, utterly destroyed. But right when the Velociraptor goes in to, handle business, a Tyrannosaurus Rex, who knows where it came from, who knows how it got in the building, comes out of nowhere and then just grabs it by his teeth and just goes to town on it and just throws it up against the structure. And then at this point, they're like, okay, this is a dangerous animal, but thank you so much. You see Dr. Grant kind of look at it just like, oh my gosh, thank you. And then they proceed and run out the building. And then right when they're running out the building, Dr. Hammond pulls up in the Jeep with Dr. Ian Malcolm. And then Dr. Grant says, Dr. Hammond, as he's coming out, after careful consideration, I have decided not to sign off on your part. And then Dr. Hammond says, me too. And then they drive off. You see the last Velociraptor that's engaging the Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's on the back and it's scratching him up, it's biting him, it's getting some pretty good licks in there. But then the Tyrannosaurus Rex kind of rolls his head. The Velociraptor flips over, he grabs it by his neck. That's the one he actually threw into the structure. And then the iconic roar and the sound of the Tyrannosaurus Rex and just the image, while the banner says, "When dinosaurs ruled the earth." A perfect shot. That was something that I don't think anyone could ever forget. So they're driving, they get to the gate where it says keep out, where they first got there, and they get on the helicopter and then they fly away. And then I kind of thought about this. I don't know, it's interesting. Earlier in the movie, they were talking about condors, and Dr. Hammond was saying that, hey, if I create a flock of condors, you wouldn't have anything to say, Dr. Malcolm. He said, no, like condors is on the verge of extinction. That's something different than something that's already been extinct. Dinosaurs had their chance and nature chose them for extinction. I don't know, maybe there's a neat kind of metaphor. I think it was a condor, or I could be completely wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was a condor flying at the end of the movie. And it's kind of symbolism of, this is where we need to be at. We need to focus on what we have now, not worrying about what had their time. Obviously, we weren't ready for it, even though there were some circumstances, how that messed up everything. Because who knows? Is there a possibility that it could go according to plan? It could have been no storm, and he got the embryos out. That rival company would have been able to create the same thing, but who knows? The rival company did not have had the type of funding that Hammond had, and they would have messed up eventually just as bad as Hammond did. So, but it was a really nice scene at the end of the movie to kind of see them safe. Everyone survived. Not everyone survived, but Dr. Malcolm survived, Sadler, Grant, Lex, Timmy, Hammond. And that's where it ended. And I believe the movie got a round of applause when I saw it initially back in 1993. So just a great movie. One of the first movies I remember really taking to in the movie theater. And I really remember and harping back to that movie theater experience. And I think that's the reason why a lot of theaters have been playing movies like that in the midst of this pandemic. I know it's been really difficult for businesses, especially for the movie theater industry, especially with a lot of people streaming and staying at home and whatnot, but they've been kind of going back to these huge blockbuster movies that people remember seeing for the first time. Even though it took a while for me to see it initially, I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. I'm sure you have seen it more than a few times. When this movie came out in 1993, I believe it was the highest grossing movie ever for that time until Titanic came out in 1997. Of course, Jurassic Park has gone on to gross more than $1 billion. Highest grossing movie ever before Titanic in 1997. So that just says a lot about the movie in itself. But once again, directed by Steven Spielberg, scored by John Williams, tremendous cast from top to bottom, tremendous acting, visual effects, practical effects, stories, iconic lines, the script. Everything just comes all together for this movie for an awesome experience. And that's what I just wanted to share with you. Just Jurassic Park talk. Who knows, I may talk about other movies, but it's going to be movies that I just take to and have great experiences with. And it reminds me of my childhood. It reminds me of just great movies in general. So I was glad to have seen this, even though it was months down the road when I was a little kid. My family owned it on VHS, and then we got it on DVD, and then I got it on Blu-ray, and now I stream it on Netflix, and I actually purchased it on digital download as well. So Jurassic Park, fantastic movie, great experience, great ride. That's about it for Life of the Party podcast with MC Ricky presents Jurassic Park Talk. Thank you for tuning in. As always, if you'd like to subscribe to my podcast, you can actually search me by inputting MC Ricky. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find me. Life of the Party podcast with MC Ricky. Once again, presents Jurassic Park Talk. What movie will I talk about next? What movie would you like to see me talk about next? Let's see. Once again, you know what I'm about to say. Otsukai sama deshita. I'll see you guys in the future. Ohayo. Ohayo. Ohayo gozaimasu.